The expectations for the Dallas Cowboys heading into 2014 most certainly weren't all that good. They were probably most effectively represented by my thoughts on the Dallas Cowboys heading into 2014. This was a team that didn't improve themselves. This was a team that had been mediocre for the past several seasons. You had Jason Garrett with lame duck status. This was pointing to all things being bad for the Cowboys, their defense perhaps being even worse than that historically bad unit in 2013. However, with that said, I said there was one beacon of hope for the Cowboys in 2014, and that was that they established DeMarco Murray, that they pounded the rock with him, they kept the defense off the field, he took some of the pressure off of Tony Romo, and he ran behind that offensive line. They maybe had a chance, and they did. That was the formula for success for the Dallas Cowboys in 2014. Work behind that offensive line that you've invested all of those first-round picks in. DeMarco Murray stays healthy the entire year. You take some of the pressure off of Tony Romo. You open things up outside for guys like Dez Bryant and Terrence Williams and Jason Witten. You keep that defense off the field. You allow Rod Marinelli to coach them up and make them better than they actually are. And the Dallas Cowboys ended up being one of the real pleasant surprises of the 2014 season, winning the NFC East, which most people I don't think saw coming. Some did, but most did not. Finishing 12-4, winning a playoff game. People mocked Jerry Jones for printing out playoff tickets before the season started. Well, maybe he knew something that we didn't. We were wrong and you were right, Jerry. We have to give you credit where credit is due. Of course, they met an unceremonious end in the divisional round when they lost to the Green Bay Packers in Lambeau in somewhat controversial fashion. And I do have to say this again. Based off of the rules, it was not a catch. A bad rule does not make a bad call. And this is something that many people do not understand. Based off of the rules and the way that you interpret the rules, it was not a catch. It is a dumb rule. I agree. That should be a catch. I agree. However, based off of the rules, it was not. And I also dispute this notion that if Dez Bryant catches that ball and they score a touchdown, that the Cowboys automatically win that game. If I remember correctly, that would have only given them a small lead. There were still more than 3 minutes left in the game. And the Green Bay Packers had Aaron Rodgers. So this whole notion that Dez Bryant catches the ball, they automatically win is fucking ludicrous and ridiculous. Because one, yeah, woulda, coulda, shouldas are nice. If ifs and buts were candies and nuts, it'd be Christmas every day. But he didn't catch the ball. But even if he did, that's no guarantee of victory. You still have Green Bay Packers offense with Aaron Rodgers. I'll take my chances there. But still a really good season for the Dallas Cowboys. And now heading into this offseason, people are wondering, will this Cowboys team be able to maintain form? Will they be able to take that next step in 2015? And part of the reason they put themselves in that position after so many years of mediocrity is, frankly, they've done better in the NFL draft than maybe we've given them credit for. Most certainly me. You go back to 2010, Dez Bryant, first-round pick, big-time hit. Jerry Jones learning, and that's a key thing. It's one thing to make mistakes, but it's another thing to make those mistakes and then learn from them and become better because of them. Way back in 98, he passed on Randy Moss because he was an idiot. Many teams were idiots that year. In 2010, he viewed Dez Bryant as a big-time special weapon, and he wasn't about to make that same mistake again. So when the opportunity came and Dez Bryant dropped on that draft board, that's what he ended up doing. He decided that he was going to go get Dez Bryant, and he did, and the rest is history. And then in 2011, he takes Tyron Smith with the 9th overall pick, who's been the cornerstone for what they've done on that offensive line. You look at 2013, you're talking about Travis Frederick, a guy that many of us, myself included, viewed more as a third-round prospect. He took at the end of round one. We're like, what the hell are you doing taking a third-round center at the end of round one? Well, Frederick has most certainly panned out. His third-round pick from that year, Terrence Williams, most certainly has panned out. His third-round pick from 2011, DeMarco Murray, most certainly panned out. And then in 2014, when so many people, again, myself included, said that maybe they should have taken Johnny Manziel, and I don't really understand why they took Zach Martin. Zach Martin most certainly had panned out for them. So a lot of investment on that offensive line, which is a very good way to go. You already had your quarterback. They hit it big on Dez Bryant. But that offensive line was key to the success of so many things that they did. But that's not to say the Cowboys have been perfect in the draft. Most certainly not. I mean, they traded up from 14 to 6 back in 2012 to get Morris Claiborne, and he is a bust. He has been a flat-out horrible miss. I mean, you gave up a second-round pick to move up 8 slots in the draft to get a bust. A complete and total bust. Just bad. And then when you look at a former second-round pick like Gavin Escobar, what the hell has he done? You look at their second-round pick from last year, Demarcus Lawrence. He showed one or two flashes, but not very much, and he didn't play a lot because of injury. But again, it was a whole notion of them trading up to the top of the second round from the middle of the second round to go get this guy. They're far from perfect, but the Cowboys do deserve a little more credit for their recent drafting than, frankly, they've been given credit for. And in particular, outside of Morris Claiborne and the horrible miss that he's been, you look at 2010, 11, 13, and 14, they most certainly have hit on those 4 first-round picks in a big way. And so much of that has helped to establish and create the identity that they have as an organization, most especially on the offensive side of the ball, and it trickles over to everything that they do as an organization on the field. Now, this was a costly offseason for the Dallas Cowboys. There's no question about it. Part of the problem with Jerry Jones is that he's been a horrible cap manager for years, and that story still continues. You lose DeMarco Murray via free agency to a divisional rival like the Philadelphia Eagles. One of your starters on the offensive line that was so good last year, Jeremy Parnell, signs a overpriced contract with the Jacksonville Jaguars. You lose guys off of your defense like Henry Melton and Anthony Spencer and Bruce Carter and George Selvey. And then you replace him with guys like Darren McFadden, guys like Greg Hardy, who were suspended for the first 10 games of the 2015 season. They definitely lost more than they gained. But one good thing for them is that they did re-sign some pieces that they needed to re-sign. This is something smart. This is something that the Cowboys have needed to do for years. They re-signed Doug Free, which I would agree with re-signing him over Jeremy Parnell. They re-signed Rolando McClain to a 1-year deal, even though he's got a suspension coming up. The fact that they didn't lose this guy that was so important to what their defense did in 2014, and they were able to get him back in another 1-year kind of prove-it deal was a very good move. They brought back Nick Hayden. They brought back Cole Beasley. Core type of players, not stars necessarily, and guys like Hayden and Beasley, but guys that are important to what you do, guys that are part of your system, guys that fit your system, guys that know and understand your system. Those are good moves by the Dallas Cowboys. So it was an offseason lacking in big splashy signings other than Greg Hardy, and was more notable maybe for some of the players that they lost via free agency, but it wasn't the worst offseason for the Dallas Cowboys. Now, based off of the success in 2014 and based off of the success of the Cowboys in recent drafts, what do they need to do in the 2015 NFL draft to ensure that they could be right back in the same position again next season? Well, let's look at their biggest needs for the NFL draft. I know a lot of people are going to point to running back as being a big need, and it is a big need. I don't know that it's necessarily the number one need. I also dispute this notion that you could just put absolutely anybody behind that offensive line and they could produce at a DeMarco Murray type level. I dispute that notion very strongly. That is a position that must be addressed in this draft. The good thing for the Cowboys, and maybe it works out with letting DeMarco Murray go, is you could find an option somewhere between rounds 2 to 4 that could come in and be a productive player right away, and you save yourself a bunch of money in terms of salary cap. That's something that Jerry Jones has done a good job of over the years, and this is an opportunity for him to show that he understands it and he gets it. This is a team that on defense has a lot of needs. They most certainly have needs in the secondary. Claiborne busting out. They've got Skandrick, who's a very, very nice player, but not much else at corner in my opinion. So they could use some upgrades there. I still think they could use some help in the back end of their defense at safety. But I think their biggest needs come on the defensive line. And this is a position that even with the signing of Greg Hardy, I was expecting them to invest multiple early picks on. But especially now with the suspension of Greg Hardy, I'm most certainly expecting to spend multiple picks early on the defensive line. The Dallas Cowboys, to me, should look at the offensive philosophy of what they've done in recent drafts, building up the trenches and then working around that, and employ that on the defensive side of the ball. You spent a second-round pick last year on DeMarcus Lawrence. There's one guy. Okay, now it's time to bring in some reinforcements on that defensive line. No more stopgaps or free agents, what have you. It's time to find those guys in the draft. They need help at defensive end. They need help at defensive tackle. I don't know if one need ends up outweighing the other. It doesn't really matter. They just need help all over the place on that defensive line. Because they could upgrade at corner and they could upgrade at safety. But if they don't upgrade on that defensive line, their run defense isn't going to improve, and those corners and safeties are still going to be under siege from other teams' passing attacks because they're going to have all day to throw because the Cowboys can't generate a consistent pass rush. That was something they really failed to do in 2014 was generate a consistent pass rush. And that's one thing that the Dallas Cowboys are going to have to do better in 2015. And one way to get better at that is via the NFL draft. They must address this position early. They must address it often. In terms of their philosophy, I think that's what the philosophy is going to be. At some point in time, they will address running back. Could be round 1 with a guy like Melvin Gordon. Maybe Jerry Jones falls in love with him, even moves up to get him. But at some point in time in the first 3 rounds, they'll address running back, and that's fine, and they should. But I think 2 of their first 3 picks must be devoted to the defensive side of the ball, and in particular, defense. Whoever the best player available is at either defensive end or defensive tackle is who they need to take in round 1, round 2, and or round 3. It's that simple. Take that philosophy you used on offense and use it on the defensive side of the ball. The old saying with professional football, and it's been true for so many years, is that games are ultimately won and lost in the trenches. Well, the Cowboys won a lot of games in 2014 because of their success in the trenches on the offensive side of the ball. Imagine how much more dangerous they could be if they someday built up the defensive line to be the same type, and they could win some games in the trenches on the defensive side of the ball. It was something that they did in the 90s that helped them win 3 Super Bowls in a 4-year stretch. And if Jerry Jones has learned from his mistakes of the past, he will understand that he can learn from his successes as well and see what he's done on offense and employ it on the defensive side of the ball and bring some more balance to the Dallas Cowboys and keep them right in the mix again in 2015.